Hello and a very warm welcome. You know, sometimes you get to a point in a story where everything comes to a head. Well, today we're looking at exactly that moment. We're going to dive deep into the powerful concluding verses of Surah Al Muminun, a section of the Quran where belief, denial, and ultimate accountability all collide in a final, dramatic confrontation.
But here's what's so interesting. Before this big confrontation kicks off, the text opens with something really gentle, a prayer. And notice, it's not a prayer for destruction or revenge. It's a plea for salvation. Save me and my people. This is so crucial because it sets a deeply humane and compassionate tone right from the start. It reminds us that the message, at its heart, is about a desire for guidance, not just condemnation.
All right, so here's our roadmap for today. First, we'll look at what this final confrontation is all about. Then, we're going to ask a really important question. What was the messenger's actual role according to these verses? That's going to lead us right into the psychology of denial. I mean, why would anyone reject a clear message? From there, we'll explore this idea of an inevitable reckoning. And finally, we'll tie it all together to understand the core principles at play: truth, choice, and accountability.
So let's jump into our first section, a final confrontation. You can really think of this part as the climax of the entire chapter. All the arguments have been made, all the stories have been told, and now everything is moving towards a sense of closure. It's about delivering a final clear warning and, ultimately, a vindication of the message itself.
You can almost feel the shift in tone here, can't you? The text moves on from just explaining things and goes straight into a direct confrontation. This is where the central conflict really comes to a head, and the focus zooms right in on justice and the fact that we're all accountable for the choices we make.
And that leads us perfectly into our next big topic. A huge reason for this whole conflict was, well, a basic misunderstanding of what the messenger was there to do. People had their own expectations. So what was his mission really all about, according to these verses?
This slide just lays out that misunderstanding so perfectly. On the one hand, you've got what people expected. They wanted a magician, maybe an angel, someone who could perform miracles on demand. But the reality presented in the text was something very different. He was a human messenger. His job wasn't about putting on a show, it was about being a bearer of clear evidence. He wasn't there to hand out rewards, but to be a clear warner.
And this right here just drives that point home, doesn't it? The messenger's authority, as it's stated, comes from the clear evidence of the message itself, from its logic and its truth, not from performing some kind of supernatural spectacle. His job is to warn, to make the choice crystal clear for people, not to force them into belief through miracles.
So this brings up a really fascinating question. If the message is based on clear evidence, why would anyone reject it? Well, this next section dives into that, exploring the idea that denial isn't always about a lack of information. A lot of the time, it's actually a psychological issue. Okay, check this out. Here's the first major psychological barrier we see. When these people are told they're causing corruption, their response isn't to think about it or reflect. No, they completely reframe reality and claim the exact opposite. We are only reformers. It's such a powerful defense mechanism.
The text has a name for this, self-deception. And the most critical part of this is that little phrase at the end, but they do not perceive. It suggests that it's entirely possible to get so lost in your own story that you genuinely believe you're doing good, even while your actions are causing real harm, all because you've managed to avoid any kind of honest self-reflection.
And then we have the second barrier, intellectual pride. When they're simply asked to believe, look at the response. It's pure mockery. By calling the believers fools, they immediately put themselves on a pedestal, making themselves feel superior. And just like that, they've shut down any real chance of engaging with the ideas.
And this is what we'd call intellectual arrogance. See, instead of actually looking at the evidence of the message, they just rationalize rejecting it through pride. It's just easier to dismiss the messenger and their followers as simple-minded than it is to actually grapple with the message itself. And the text just flips that on its head, saying they are the ones who are foolish, but they do not know.
So what happens next? If the message is clear, but people keep denying it because of these psychological blocks, what's the outcome? Well, that brings us to our next theme, an inevitable reckoning, where the text starts to talk about consequences and divine justice. This verse introduces a really powerful metaphor, this idea of a rope being laid around the necks of the powerful opponents. Now, this isn't talking about a literal punishment happening right then and there. Instead, it's a symbol of divine restraint, of ultimate control. It's basically a statement that no matter how powerful someone might seem, they are still subject to a higher authority and an accountability they just can't escape.
And to make it clear that this isn't just some random, one-time event, the text points to a historical pattern that just keeps repeating.
It's a pretty simple three-step process we see over and over. A messenger is sent with a clear message, that message gets denied, and then, eventually, consequences are delivered. The point here is to show this isn't arbitrary. It's presented as a consistent principle throughout history.
And this is so important. This whole process isn't portrayed as random or chaotic at all. The text really emphasizes that divine justice, whether that's when signs are shown or when consequences arrive, it all follows a specific order and timing. It's a system that you can't rush or delay with human demands or try to manipulate.
Okay, so this brings us to our final section, where we're going to tie all of these big ideas together. What are the core principles, the main takeaways we should get from this final confrontation in Surah Al Muminun?
So, let's put all the puzzle pieces on the table. The big picture we're seeing here isn't just a series of random events. It's a complete system. First, truth is delivered in a clear and rational way. Second, when that truth is rejected, it's often for psychological reasons, like pride or self-deception, not because the evidence was bad. Third, we humans are given the complete freedom to choose, to accept or reject that truth. But fourth, and this is a big one, moral accountability for that choice is presented as absolute and inescapable. And finally, divine justice is shown to be wise and discerning. It makes a clear distinction between mercy for those who are open and receptive and consequences for those who are willfully resistant.
And so, we end with a question for you to think about. This text draws a really sharp line between those who reject a message out of pride and mockery and a messenger who presents his case with clear evidence. It really leaves us to wonder, in any area of our own lives, what is the real difference between healthy, evidence-based skepticism and a willful denial that simply refuses to engage with the truth no matter how clear it might be? Something to chew on.